Good morning. This is retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church in Amherst, New York, a little suburb of Buffalo. And this morning, during this COVID time, the text for this, the 20th Sunday after the Feast of Holy Trinity, is recorded in Matthew, the 22nd chapter, and we're looking particularly at verse 1. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables, and said. Here ends that portion of the gospel text. The text itself is a story of a wedding. But Jesus told tons of stories about all different kinds of subjects. He talked about shepherds, he talked about farmers, he talked about gleaners who picked up behind the harvesters. He talked about all different kinds of things, but in fact, it was never about those things. Jesus wasn't a shepherd. Jesus wasn't a farmer. Jesus wasn't a gleaner. And he wasn't throwing a wedding. Why does he speak like this? That's what the first verse explains to us. It says that Jesus went around speaking to them, and the Greek word is paraboles, English parables. And if you're into math, you would know what a parabola is. It's on a graph, an XY graph. It's either this side or this side or this side or the bottom side of the graph. But the thing about a parable is it never touches the baseline. It comes toward it, and then it disappears away from it. It doesn't touch the actual line, just like the words that Jesus uses are never exactly about the subject itself. And the subject here in this text is about a Jewish practice that we're unfamiliar with typically. And if you've thrown a wedding or been to a wedding, probably the only ones that follow this practice are the bridesmaids, possibly the groomsmen. And the bridesmaids will get together and the girls will decide on, the color's purple, the color's pink, the color's gray, whatever the color of dress and shoes, and then they try to match everything. You've seen this, right? You've been through this. That's the closest you can get to understanding Jesus' story today about the wedding outfit. Because in Jesus' day, even a poor man's wedding, which would last about a week, a middle-class wedding would last 2 weeks, upper-class wedding would last 3 weeks, and royal wedding would last a month or more. To be invited to this was an extensive and exhaustive thing. How so? Because the one who was throwing the wedding would have to provide lodging, food, and the gowns that everyone wore. See, it wasn't just like the bridegrooms or the groomsmen color coordinated. The robes, I'm not wearing the alb today, but the robes that they wore, tied off at the waist, they could be hiked up for dancing and drinking and partying. These were provided by the host. And you were expected to wear these. And at night, you'd put them out the door, and they'd all be picked up from wherever the guests were staying, and the servants would scrub everything down. Or you'd have family members and friends help you scrub everything down. So it was absolutely required during that wedding that you endure the whole week. That's what you wore. Why? Because the idea was that here at this point, everyone is the same. No one's going to come in rich attire and brag about how much they have. This is a time where families get together as one. And the outfit was leveled the playing field. So no one could come in with an Armani suit and, No. You wore what they gave you, same as everyone. All right, we don't do that. And a wedding, a poor man's wedding, was expected to cost an annual salary. 1 year's salary for a poor man's wedding. That was like when Jesus went to the wedding at Cana, and they ran out of wine after a few days. Jesus' mother was obviously a relative, knew that they'd run out, went to Jesus and said, we have a major faux pas here. We've run out of wine. We're going to have a bunch of angry guests shortly. And we got several more days. And so Jesus made several hundred gallons more wine. These were big pots. And I don't know if you read archaeology, in the last couple of months, we've uncovered an actual pot factory near Jerusalem, several miles south of it, I think it was. And the entire factory is all still there. It was left, apparently, by war. Anyways, so all of the details that Jesus is talking about are things that we've backed up and established by archaeology and the text itself and the words. But why does Jesus use these type of metaphors or similes or figures of speech to describe what he's really talking about? And he's not talking about the wedding robes. He's not really talking about a wedding at all. He's talking about righteousness. He's talking about people who are acceptable, because that's what the wedding gown made you, acceptable at the wedding. Without it, just like the guy at the end, he wanted to show himself off. He wanted to be, top dog. And the king came in, and you don't do that at a royal wedding. And he was executed. You talk about a fashion mistake. That one would get you killed. And they knew that. No one was that stupid. That was obvious. So, again, why does Jesus speak this way? Because he's trying to, again, in this parable, to use things that they were particularly aware of. Again, the customs have changed. So it's harder for us to be understanding what Jesus is talking about. But he's talking about being acceptable at a place and time. And you see, his whole coming, the whole point of his being sent by his Father to us, was to make us all acceptable. You see, the thing about the wedding gowns, it leveled the playing field. It didn't matter if you were the fanciest dude in town or the poorest guy that just happened to be a relative of the family that just lived out rough in the wilderness in a tent. Didn't matter. It's as I've joked about nursing homes. You can never tell who the rich person is in the nursing home. Because by the end of the week, they're not wearing their own sweater, they don't have their own teeth, they don't have their glasses, and their tissue box, the most prized possession in a nursing home, is someone else's. So on Friday, they collect all the glasses, all the teeth, all the sweaters, which all have names on them, and they sort them back out. Every Friday, everywhere. You can't tell who was wealthy or who was brilliant or who was not, because it's level. Why Jesus told of this story is because the purpose of that was to level everyone out, to make both the families the same. So there were no bragging rights. Everyone was the same. That's what the gospel does. The gospel is God's way of coming in and going, ha! In sin, you're all the same. For all have sinned and fallen. There's none that is righteous, no, not a single one. That's easy. That's a level playing field. Everyone is blah. Okay, well, that being done, now what's left? Then the Father says, I'm sending my Son, and in him, that he has been born among us, to be us, to take upon himself all of the guilt, the sin, the death, the doom, the destiny of all of humankind. And in one fell swoop, in his own body of flesh, as also true God, Son of the Father, he reconciles the entire world to himself. That's the beauty of this, because now in the gospel, just like under the law, we're the same. There's none that is righteous. In the gospel, we're all the same. Children of God, and every child is precious. Are there any children that are garbage? No. Now, we humans don't look at it that way. We make a million distinctions. Even in our own families, you find different distinctions. And people look at it that way. In fact, maybe in families, it's the most pronounced in the world. But even in a yacht club, in Florida, we had these different yacht clubs. And it was always funny because there was kind of those who had, only a few $1 million. And their boats were somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. Kind of a mediocre boat,
Oh, yeah.
You're not really there. Then there were those who had hundreds of millions. Their boats were over 60 feet long, had an engine compartment that you could walk into, standing up, with double diesels, Detroit diesels, and they had a crew, a permanent crew. That was midline. And then there were those who were billionaires. Their boats were over 100 feet long. Professional crews, 4 levels high. And you just thought you stepped on the Queen Mary. I did a funeral from one of those, where we dumped cremains at sea. It was a British, what do they call him? Admiral. His son, actually grandson, drowned. And so that was, they hired planes, helicopters, just for the day. Fly people in from England, several planes. That's when money really doesn't matter. But even in yacht clubs, they would look down at each other. You see how humans are. They're like chickens. You've heard of pecking order? That comes from chickens. And chickens in the yard will push each other away for the corn, the grain. And the biggest, fattest chicken, they get the most, usually, because that's the pecking order. And sometimes the littlest just lay down and die. The gospel is contrary to that whole way of thinking. And that's what Jesus is telling them in this parable. That the gown levels it off. And with that, we're all the same. In the gospel, do you have any sin? No, you don't have any sin. How can you have sin? Jesus took it upon himself on the cross. He paid the penalty. He took the guilt. He took the thing itself. And I'm not going to say I'm so smart as to know what sin itself is. Because in some way we are living offenses against the Almighty God. Since I haven't met him, personally, it's a little hard to say what it is exactly about me that gets him so angry. I'm not going to presume to say. But whatever it is, it's gone. All gone. Replaced by what? Not our own robes or fancy clothes. That's the point of the guy being tossed out and destroyed. Everyone was acceptable in the wedding gown. Everyone is acceptable in the righteousness of the Father's Son. And what is that righteousness? That is simply to be loved. That's it. God is no longer, as under the law, furious. He is instead, under the gospel, a happy dad. Under the law, we're destroyed. Under the gospel, we have life everlasting with God, as his children, forever. That's the beauty of this whole idea. That's the beauty of what we have right here in this text. That's why it's so beautiful. It's just that we're not Jews of the first century. We don't really get the parable. But see, in all of Jesus' stories, he's always bringing us to a magnificent place. Always teaching us about the kindness of the Father. It's just that he has to speak like this because we're such children. Even when we're grown up, I'm just about 63, and yet we're still such children. Our thinking is so primitive. Our instincts are so raw. And we need such consolation that only the gospel can give. So, that's the sense of what Jesus is talking about in this text this morning. And from our end, it would hopefully teach us, as he was teaching them there, they clearly understood that. You know, in every story, there's a mechanism called the tertium. the tertium. Tertium is the teeter-totter, the fulcrum. It's the point of comparison of the figure of speech. And they understood. He was saying that it made them all equal. With explanation, we understand it today. But what he's bringing to us are subjects so magnificent, so wonderful, about things so high over us, that like with children, all you can do is say, well, it's like this. Well, what's that ride like at the fair? Well, you know when you went on that ride? It's like that. Because children can compare this, what they know, to this they don't know. And they're less afraid, they're less worried. And that's the point of this. So as Christians, it's incumbent for us not to make divisions and differences among human beings. It is incumbent upon us to see all through the glasses of the gospel, through the eyes of Christ, that before him all are sinners, and yet he has died for us all. No exceptions. Does it matter who you are? No. Does it matter what you do? No. No, it doesn't. Because the gospel isn't what we do anyways. It's all about the story of Jesus. Martin Luther said one simple little thing, very important, maybe one of the most important things he said. The gospel is nothing else than the story of Jesus. That's it. And that's all we have as the church to bring. So, that's it. Amen.